Hey, what's going on? Welcome back for the second time today. My name is Timothy with Mana Rocks, and we are going to look at the Commander 2020 Ikoria spoilers that are on Mythic Spoiler. Not too many to talk about today. We covered a big chunk of them yesterday, and as is the case with all these videos, as soon as I clicked done with the video, a whole slew of other spoilers popped up. But we talked about a lot of the cycling payoffs. We talked about a lot of the partner commanders here. Lava Brink Floodgates is one of my favorite cards. I just like these political twos. Capricopio was also really cool. But we saw most of the other commanders, and we're at the point where people across the web are starting to do full spoilers of the entire decks. So I think we've probably seen a majority of the commander spoilers. There might be a couple more after today's video, but we'll try to cover all the rest in one video instead of doing like just a couple here. But we left off with most of the stuff that was going to be in the Cyclone deck. There was a Locust God reprint, which, you know, the less Locust Gods that are out in the world, the better. So Wizards, why'd you do this? Locust God is just not a fair commander. I guess it's fair, but it's not fair. Astral Drift, Fluctuator. I didn't realize Fluctuator was worth money, but apparently this is a value reprint for the Cyclone deck. And then, you know, Dismantle and Wave was really strong. Crystalline Resonance was pretty cool. And then Eternal Dragon, card that people forgot about, but it's pretty sweet. Remember that our focus here is on new cards. So reprints, we might mention a thing or two about them, but I'm not going to focus on reprints. I'm not going to read them unless they're super relevant for some reason, some way, shape, or form. And with all that being said, as always, as is the case with all these videos or any video on this channel, feel free to subscribe below if the video has made any difference in your day. If it, provided you even a modicum of information, feel free to subscribe below or leave a comment telling me, you know, any feedback that you have, positive or negative. If it's negative, just keep it constructive and clean, and I'm cool with it. You can also find us on Twitter, MTG_ManaRock. So let's talk about some Commander 2020 cards, shall we? Starting things off with Twinning Staff. Twinning meaning 2, obviously. 3 colorless mana for a rare artifact. Again, rarity doesn't really matter too much for Commander product. If I say a rare, that's just a way of saying you're only getting one copy of this in a Commander deck. It won't be in any other Commander decks. But anyway, Twinning Staff, 3 mana artifact that says if you would copy a spell 1 or more times, instead copy it that many times plus an additional time, you may choose new targets for the additional copy. So your storm count is always +1. And this counts anytime you copy any spell. And you got to cop out. You got to keep an eye out for certain cards that you would assume copy spells, but might actually just cast spells. Like, for instance, Spell Twine. I'm not even 100% sure about this, but I think Spell Twine casts the actual cards from the graveyard, but it might copy the spells and then cast the copy. So anytime you make a copy of something, an instant or sorcery, or rather a spell, I guess you can only really copy instants and sorceries on the stack, but anytime you copy that spell, you're going to get 1 additional copy. And that includes Storm as well. We already mentioned Storm when it came to the Teamer deck, which I've got to assume this is the deck that the Teamer, or that Twinning Staff is coming in. But we already mentioned Storm, right? Storm creates copies for each other spell cast that turn. Twinning Staff gives you +1, but doesn't just work for Storm cards. It works for anything that copies, right? So if you think like a Dual Caster Mage or Naru Meha, or, you know, there's a million spells out there that copy stuff. Just like a Reverberate, you get an additional copy, which is a pretty strong just static ability to have on board for a deck that's focused on making copies of stuff. Clearly, it works with the Commander too. The Commander says if it's tapped and you cast an instant, or you cast your first instant each turn, you get to copy that instant, and then Twinning Staff will say, oh, well, here's an additional copy, which can give you a lot of value, especially if it's like a draw spell or something like that. You can just gain a ton of card advantage off of that. Twinning Staff also has this really, you know, expensive activated ability. For 7 mana, you can tap it to copy target instant or sorcery you control and choose new targets, as is the case with all these copies, which is a nice gravy ability to have, but it's extremely expensive, right? If you care about copying the spells, then you're going to play this just as like the base 3 mana artifact, and then it may come up later in the game that you pay 7 mana to copy a spell, but that is expensive enough that you won't do it too often, I don't think, especially since you have to copy your own spell, which means you have to presumably spend your own mana and then also have 7 additional mana. So you really are only copying cheap spells unless you're in a deck that just makes tons of mana. But a lot of decks, just casual decks or out-of-the-box decks aren't going to be, casting an expensive spell and then also paying 7 mana to copy it. So we'll see if that comes up too often, like as far as the precons go, but there are certainly decks that can abuse it, and if you care about copying your spells, then this is a nice inclusion to have. It's just a free way to copy spells, kind of like a Mirari, and I say that because it's down in the Thesaurus, or Swarm Intelligence, right? Swarm Intelligence, but doesn't do the copying for you, just pays you off once you're doing the copying. So I don't know, seems like a pretty sweet card. Probably play really well out of the box, and I'm sure there are some decks that are just going to abuse this with extra turns and stuff like that, but it's a cool little card. Animist Awakening is back, just an X spell that presumably ramps you. We're going to see a couple X spells because of the Hydra, the alternative commander for the Sultai deck, cares about X spells, so they're going to throw a couple in there. Same goes for Nissa, Steward of Elements. I'm not going to read this card, but it's the only non-mono green Nissa out there, and I just love this card in general. It's the only Planeswalker with X in its mana cost, and I think this is just a really cool design for a Planeswalker. They haven't done it again since. Put X in the cost of a Planeswalker, but it's a really balanced one. It's fun to play. It's got some kind of like top deck shenanigans with its 0, and clearly it's just included in that deck because the X matters. But on to new cards. Another really sweet one. Dredge the Mire is a sorcery. It's 3 and a black, so 4 mana sorcery. Each opponent chooses a creature card in their graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. So you're going to get, in a 4-person game, you're going to get 3 creatures for 4 mana, which is pretty good. You're going to get 1 creature from each opponent. The thing is, obviously, your opponents get to choose the creature. So unless you've made a deal with someone or unless there's a problem on the board that needs to be dealt with, you are going to get the worst creature from each opponent's graveyard, which might not necessarily be a bad thing. If you're playing this in a deck that can control the graveyard, can eat certain creatures out of the graveyard or exile things selectively, then you might be able to put yourself in a position where you can kind of pick and choose which creatures you're going to get. It's also a very good political tool. Like, hey, give me that out of your graveyard. Give me that, I don't know, your, excuse me. Give me that Woodfall Primus. I'm just going big here. Hey, give me that Woodfall Primus and I'll destroy his thing. That thing that's been, locking you out of this game, right? Or, hey, give me the Skullwinder back and then I'll let you get a card of your choice back. Stuff like that. It's just really cool political tool. It does have the chance of bricking, right? Sometimes you play like a Sepulchral Primordial and somebody doesn't have any creatures in their graveyard, but big whoop, right? If you're casting this spell, if you're literally putting on the stack, it means that you're getting some sort of value out of it, even if some people might not have a good graveyard. People don't play bad creatures in Commander. Well, okay, never mind. Let me stop there. The flavor text is also pretty funny. It says, fortunately, the reanimation spell just missed the long-dead colony of dung scorpions. Ha, 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 get it. All right, so a cool little political reanimation tool there. Moving right along, we've got Souvenir Snatcher. He takes your souvenirs. Don't go to Disney World. He's there. He's going to take your stuff. I'm sorry. 4 and a blue for a 4/4 flyer that says whenever this creature mutates, gain control of target non-creature artifact. Okay, I misread that actually the first time. I thought it was non-creature permanent, but it's non-creature artifact. So, and that kind of makes sense, right? It's a Souvenir Snatcher. It's a bird that's like stealing your trinkets and stuff. Like they love doing this with birds. There are just birds all over Magic that just like steal artifacts and stuff, like Thief and Magpie and whatnot. Excuse me again. I'm so unprofessional. I already said in the other video. Downvote for Coffin. Mutate for 5 and a blue, right? So the mutate cost is actually more expensive on this card, which it seems like the trend is to do it the other way around, having a more expensive creature with a cheaper mutate cost. This is actually more expensive, but this is sweet, right? It takes your opponent's Gilded Lotus, their Skull Clamp, their Soul Ring, blah, 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 and if you're able to mutate onto it further, you gain more cards from your opponent. Again, there's not like this big artifact deck in the precon, so it's kind of weird that there's this random artifact hate, but it's always welcome. People play artifacts in virtually every Commander deck, and we saw the green card in the first set of spoilers that made a 3/3 beast for each artifact your opponent controls. It must be like Wizards' way of just giving you some tools to combat artifact decks for whatever reason, because, artifacts are clearly busted, but anyway, Souvenir Snatcher. It's a cool card if you are in a meta game, or in a meta that cares about artifacts, you're playing against a lot of Joyras or Breas or stuff like that, then Souvenir Snatcher is pretty sweet tool against them. Maybe not the best. You can play tons of things that just steal artifacts, but this lets you kind of do it repeatedly if you have other mutate creatures. And remember, you don't have to be playing a mutate deck for your mutate cards to work. You always get the one-shot mutate effect by just mutating this onto something else. So Souvenir Snatcher is pretty cool. It's pretty gnarly 4/4 bird. 5 mana 4/4 is not irrelevant either, and you might get to steal something cool with it. Avenging Bhandar is 3 white for a 3/3 human warrior with double strike. 5 mana 3/3 double strike in commander. I would say that's below par. That's just not going to cut it most of the time. But you get an extra little bonus here. It says, whenever Avenging Bhandar attacks, put a double strike counter on another target attacking creature. So if you attack with this and you attack with another creature, you can just permanently give double strike to one of your other creatures. And that's actually a very powerful effect. The problem, of course, being that, this is a 5 mana 3/3. Sure, double strike makes it virtually like a 6/3. With some first strike damage tacked in. That's how people always describe double strike. I don't know why, but this is like a slow commander card for just the average commander deck, right? If my plan is to play a creature and then on turn 5 tap out for this, and then on turn 6 be in a position where I'm able to attack with both of those, that doesn't always pan out pretty well. 5 mana kind of like dorky stat line creatures are like the bane of my existence when it comes to commander, because it just shows that, hey, I've got this powerful attack trigger. I'm going to play this on the board. Next turn, you can see exactly what I'm intending to do. I've got this other thing I want to give double strike. It just begs for someone to interact with you and stop what you're doing. And this creature doesn't have haste. It doesn't affect the board when it comes down. It's not like when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get a double strike counter. You have to survive a turn or give it haste or something like that, which means as a standalone card, it's not very good. But, there are positions where this is going to be powerful. If your opponents just don't have removal spells or blockers on board for some reason, then you start giving your team double strike. And I guess that's fine. There are better ways to give double strike. I would rather just pay an extra mana and have a true conviction on board, and then everything has double strike and lifelink. And, I don't have to worry about my opponent just targeting my thing with a removal spell for 1 or 2 mana and killing my 5 mana play. But, excuse me, Avenging Bhandar seems like a fun card to play as a precon inclusion. Doesn't seem like I'm going to enjoy this card too much outside of the actual, I want to say limited format, but commander versus commander format with the precons. What's up next? Vitality Hunter, White Nightmare. Okay. Is this Magic's first White Nightmare? Probably. Vitality Hunter is a 3 and a white for a 3/4 lifelinker. That's relevant in Commander. You'll always welcome a lifelinker in Commander. It has, Monstrosity for X white. And the way Monstrosity works is you pay that cost. X is whatever you want it to be. And you pay white, and you put that many counters. You put X counters on the thing, and it becomes monstrous. And you can only become monstrous if you haven't already become monstrous. So you basically had a one-shot monstrosity ability. So you can monstrous this once for however much mana you want to dump into it. And when it becomes monstrous, you put a lifelink counter on each of up to X target creatures. Again, this could be a cool political tool. It's like, hey, you don't mess with my Vitality Hunter, you don't mess with my stuff here. I'm going to give my creatures lifelink, but I might actually put a lifelink counter on one of your creatures or one of your creatures. And most people will be like, you know what? Yeah, cool. Whatever. Or, hey, you have a Spectral Searchlight or something like that. Why don't you give me an extra mana for this monstrosity and I'll put a lifelink counter on your creature. Just stuff like that comes up when you can give something beneficial to your opponent's creatures. And I think this card's cool. Just in design, a White Nightmare is really weird. The art is just kind of bizarre and strange. It's got these lotus petals. And even though the overall effect here is that you're getting a big creature and your board has lifelink, that's not exactly bad. You only paid 4 mana initially. You can monstrosity this potentially into just this enormous lifelink creature. And lifelink is a very relevant ability for Commander. So I like the design of this card. It's got some political hinging to it as well. But nothing really super exciting. Just a solid card. What do we have next? Slippery Bog Bhandar. Look at this Bogle. Does Bogles always have little man hands and ugly faces? I'm looking at it down here. I don't know if you guys can see the slippery boggle, but yeah, I guess that's what they look like. It's kind of gross when you look at it like that. But anyway, the card we're talking about is Slippery Bog Bhandar. It's a 3/3 flash hexproof human druid for 3 and a green. So 4 mana, 3/3 flash hexproof. Okay, hexproof is a little bit interesting to have just on a random creature, but it's, in flavor with the Slippery Bogle, hexproof creatures. It says when Slippery Bog Bhandar enters the battlefield, put a hexproof counter on target creature, then move any number of counters from creatures you control onto that counter. That's pretty cool. This can, again, do some shenanigans with counters, with different types of counters that aren't just +1/+1 counters. I don't know off the top of my head, like, what kind of nonsensical things you can do with that, but you might be able to move, think about it. You can move all the counters from a thing in the ice, take those all off and put it here, and then cast a spell and flip your thing in the ice, bounce this thing back to your hand, and have, hexproof available. I don't know. I'm just thinking off the top of my head what other kind of counters would be worth moving around. But for the most part, this is going to protect one of your creatures, make it a hard to deal with threat because of hexproof, and also hopefully put in a couple additional +1/+1 counters, or in the case of this precon, maybe some vigilant counters or flying counters or stuff like that on one big creature. So you're going to go crazy on one big creature. I'm glad this is a card that's in Commander and not in the actual set, because this would just be a nightmare to play against in Limited. But for Commander, I could see some decks wanting this sort of thing. Like Atraxa might be interested in a Slippery Bog Bhandar. You can proliferate hexproof counters for whatever reason. But yeah, it seems pretty cool. Nice addition. Nice way to protect creatures in a green deck. Next up, there have been a lot of comments about this card already, and there were not there. It hasn't been spoiled for that long. Let's just put it that way. Cryptic Trilobite. Gavin Verhey said, "Hey, we're gonna get our 4th Trilobite in this set. So Trilobite Tribal, let's do it." Anyway, Cryptic Trilobite is a colorless creature. It's not an artifact. It's just got no color. It costs XX for a 0/0. Obviously, it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So if you pay, 2 mana total, this is going to be a 1/1. If you pay 4 mana, it's going to be a 2/2. Kind of like your standard Walking Ballista, Hangerback Walker, similar cards. It says remove a +1/+1 counter from Cryptic Trilobite. Add colorless. Spend it only to activate abilities. So let's say you pay 4 mana total for this card. It comes down with 2 +1/+1 counters. You can remove those +1/+1 counters to make 4 colorless mana. So whatever you dump into this, you can actually remove all those counters to produce the same amount of mana. Granted, it's all colorless mana, and you can't cast spells with that mana. You can only activate abilities. So you're looking at mana sinks here. You want to dump all of your mana into like a certain spot. Actually, you want to dump all your mana into this, and then you want to convert all of the counters on this into colorless mana for spells, I presume. Maybe not all in the same turn, because then you just net even on mana, but this is one of those things where you're basically storing up mana on it in the form of +1/+1 counters, and then you want to untap, and you essentially have like double mana for your abilities the next turn. One place you can use the mana is in this creature's own ability, which is 1, tap it, put a +1/+1 counter on Cryptic Trilobite. So let's say this is a 2/2. You remove a counter from it, so it's a 1/1, but you have 2 colorless mana floating. You use one of that colorless mana to tap this and put a counter back on it. Well, it's back up to a 2/2. You didn't really get anywhere. It didn't get bigger, but you also have a colorless mana floating, right? So basically, this always nets you an extra mana every turn, virtually for free, because you can make it the same stat line it started with, but also just have a mana floating by the time you're done going through that iteration. And obviously, if you can put extra +1/+1 counters on this card, you're basically creating extra mana that way for abilities. So a lot of people mentioned in the comments, and I kind of had the same fear, that this feels broken somehow. the key being somehow. I'm not sure off the top of my head how you can just completely abuse this card. Obviously, if you have infinite mana, whatever, it doesn't matter, because you can make infinite mana off this ability, but you already had infinite mana, so it doesn't really change too much. It seems like a mana sink that's looking to just produce a ton of extra mana for whatever abilities you might have out there. But I don't know. It seems interesting, but it also seems like possibly a dangerous design somehow for like maybe some other combo or something like that. But I don't know what that combo is. As it stands, it's a cool looking card with a really bizarre and powerful design, but I don't know if it's actually broken or if it's just like the fear of these like colorless XX cards that I have from like Walking Ballista or something that makes me think it's going to be broken. Anyway, not broken, but very powerful. We have Surly Badgersaur. Badgersaur. I'll give you one guess what creature type this is. And sorry, it's a badger dinosaur. I ruined it. Badger is a creature type. I don't know. I thought they were all beasts, and then they changed them to badger. It's like the pangolin thing, right? I guess badger is just a creature type now. It probably has been before. Is charging badger a badger? Because if not, we're going to riot. Anyway, Surly Badgersaur is a pretty strong card. It's 3 in a red for a 3/3 badger dinosaur, obviously. It says whenever you discard a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever you discard a land, create a treasure token. And whenever you discard a non-creature, non-land, it fights up to one target creature you don't control. So this is kind of like that Bone Miser card from last year. Or, you know, like we call it the reverse waste knot, where if you're discarding a bunch of cards, you're in a deck that, I don't know, cycles a lot. Or in, you know, non-precon decks, if you're in a deck that's going to wheel a lot and just, you know, discard your card to draw a new hand, or discard your hand to draw new hands and stuff like that a lot, then you're going to get a bunch of extra benefits off of this. It's going to get bigger, assuming you're discarding creatures. You're going to make extra mana in the form of treasure tokens if you're discarding lands, and you can even use this as creature removal by fighting other creatures if you're discarding just regular spells like artifacts and enchantments, planeswalkers, stuff like that. So it's got a lot of versatility to it, potentially becoming a huge monster that can also be used as removal spells. Where this seems really awesome is in a Daretti deck. Daretti Scrap Savant. Is that the original Daretti? Whatever, mono red Daretti, where you can plus it to discard cards. Actually, any planeswalker that can plus to discard cards is going to be really powerful here. And you know, this makes treasure tokens as well, so there's artifacts. But also Anya, Falcon Wrath from last year's Commander decks. Just anything that can turbo out discards, this is going to be really powerful, right? And the fact that you get to hold up a lot of effects like this at instant speed means this can be instant speed creature removal. It can get bigger on, you know, just a whim. You can have extra mana that your opponent doesn't necessarily know about. So probably an auto include in Anya decks, Daretti decks, anything else that's looking to discard a bunch, Nekuzar decks, wheel decks like Niv Mizzet or Locust God, stuff like that. There's just so many decks that this is going to fit in, and it's a cool utility card that has actually quite a bit of utility going on for decks that are going to be discarding a lot. In the Precon, the Cyclone deck, this is going to be a shoe-in. I assume basically all Cyclone decks moving forward, whether they, you know, derive from the, or depart from the actual Commander deck or not, are going to include this Badgersaur here. So it seems like a really powerful addition to all of those wheel decks out there. And we have one more card to talk about. It's kind of an annoying card to talk about here, but we've seen this cycle of cards that have like just standard abilities, like instant speed abilities, but if you control a commander, they're free to cast, so you get this kind of like oops surprise factor. None of them have been absurdly good or anything like that. They have been relevant. In fact, I need to actually go back because I think we might have missed a couple spoilers. But anyway, Fierce Guardianship is the blue one, and it's a negate. It counters target non-creature spell for 2 and a blue, and 3 mana to counter a non-creature spell is not really worth it in Commander. In fact, you know, 3 mana to counter any spell is kind of pushing it to the point of almost unplayability in Commander unless you get some extra bonus. But the fact that you can do this for free if you have a Commander on board is just like it makes my like it makes my like hair stand up on end. It's just upsetting that there's just this extra free counter spell for non-creatures, and it's a little limited, but we have enough free counter spells. Like this could have been a bounce spell, this could have been a draw spell. Stop giving people free counter spells in in Commander. We don't need more of them. Granted, the ones that we do have are extremely expensive, but I expect this card is going to be very expensive as well. So later on down the line, if you didn't buy this pre-con, good luck getting a copy of this card because it's going to be like $20 or something like that. Or at least that's my guess. People love some free counter spells. Control players out there, I'm sorry, you're not bad people, but you're not one of the good guys. You're like an anti-hero. Your hard control decks that are just looking to combo me out and make sure I can't do anything. You're against the grain, is all I'm saying. So, Fierce Guardianship, a little bit annoying. I wish there was some other cost attached to this, but at least you have to have your commander right. You can't just run this out and it's always going to be free. But the fact that the drawback being you can cast this for 3 mana as a negate is also very real. It means that it's never just like a dead card because you don't have your commander. It's just not at its best if you don't have a commander. So, actually, this just reminded me. I need to scroll down real quick and make sure we didn't miss a couple cards here. Because we might have on a previous day, but maybe not. Maybe I'm going too far back here. All right, I don't think we actually missed them. So I was looking for the red one in that cycle. It's a redirect, and I don't remember talking about that card. It just jogged my memory that we hadn't talked about the red one, but the red one has been spoiled, and I was just looking for it real quick. I guess I could have paused the video and, professionally done that or something, but I didn't. So here we are. I guess the red one, I know I've seen it. It's a redirect, right? It says if you control your commander, you can cast it for free, and then it lets you redirect a spell or ability, I believe. Anyway, I don't see it here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking for it. Maybe I saw it on a different website or something like that. But there you go. We're going to kick off with a really annoying control card. But look, control players need stuff too. As much as we hate playing against control, or maybe you love playing control yourself, everybody's got to get something out of these commander decks. And here you go, control decks. You got another free counter spell for your stupid Nezahal deck or whatever. I don't know who's playing Nezahal. Brian, you, I guess. Anyway, that's going to go ahead and do it. That's all of the commander spoilers we have on Mythic Spoiler. I would expect maybe 1 or 2 more days of videos. I don't know if the entire set has been spoiled yet or not for Commander. I know for the actual set it hasn't. So we will be on the lookout for whatever spoilers come our way. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you have any comments about any of the cards, maybe I misread something, misunderstood something, or you are just excited to talk about something, feel free to leave those in the comments below. You can find us on Twitter at MTG_Manorox. Again, I don't really use the Twitter a lot, but that's because people don't really follow on Twitter. So if you want to add us on Twitter, it is MTG_Manorox. I would like to use that a little bit more, but haven't really had an incentive to do so, So anyway, that's going to go ahead and cover our Commander spoilers for today. Thanks for watching. My name's Timothy with Manorox, and I will see you all next time.